Let's go. Okay, on the dot 9 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. Goeiemorgen, dames en heren, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the very first Spekgesprek at NAMPO ALFA. I'm going to ask those of you at the back, please take your seats. We are ready to begin with what promises to be quite an insightful discussion. If I haven't had the privilege of meeting you, my name is Ivor Price. I'm with Food for Mzansi. And it's such a big honor to guide today's conversation about what I believe is South Africa's most underrated success story, pork. If you think about pork for a moment, and I was discussing this with a media colleague briefly outside, pork already lives in most of our joyful moments. Well, certainly the case in my life. If I think about the Christmas ham that brings families together, if you think about that Sunday roast that your grandmother used to make, or if you have some time on the weekend and you want to do something something special for the family, you do bacon. And one of the media colleagues and I were just chatting and saying, hey, we could do some sizzling bacon for breakfast right about now. Pork is already part of who we are, but mostly on special occasions. And today we're here to ask, what if pork became part of our everyday lives? Is that possible? What would happen? Because balance behind every delicious chop is surely a story of science, it's a story of data, it's a story of care, it's a story of innovation, from farm to fork. And that is what Spekgesprek is all about. It's bringing together farmers, scientists, communicators, and consumers to imagine the full potential of South Africa's pork industry. This session is proudly hosted by Agritistics in partnership with NAMPO ALFA, who has been a great source of support. It is sponsored by the South African Pork Producers Organization, SAPO and Escort. And both SAPO and Escort are champions of excellence in our pork industry. So sit back, relax, get ready for bold, honest, hopefully inspiring conversations from the dream to the daily dish. But here to do the official welcome, please put your hands together for Dina Nau. She is the General Manager for Agritistics.
Thank you, Ivor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for the very first Spekgesprek. This was an initiative to get the pork industry also part of NAMPO ALFA, the livestock expo here today, well, since Thursday. I want to thank you, Albert, for inviting us and accepting our ideas that we have on the Spekgesprek. We believe that this will still grow into a very large gesprek. So hopefully we don't skiets back, but we will have the conversations, that is all the questions asked, and we'll hopefully be able to answer at least some of them. I would like to thank the panel members for joining us today, and for Ivor coming all the way from Cape Town. I very much appreciate you also being here and leading this conversation today. I just want to start with a thought of the day. For a thought of the day, just as a farmer tends to his livestock with care, ensuring each animal is fed, sheltered, and guided, so does our Heavenly Father also takes care of us. Livestock farming reminds us of the beauty of stewardship, so of being entrusted with life that depends on our hands. May we be faithful shepherds in our work, our homes, and our communities, reflecting God's heart for creation and His people. Please close your eyes. Lord, thank you for the land, thank you for the animals, and the calling you've placed in our hands. Teach us to work with gratitude and integrity, to care for your creation as you care for us. Bless the farmers, their families, and the harvests to come. May every field and every flock reflect your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dina. Of course, this conversation is being live streamed, so the beauty of live stream is that you take it beyond just the confines of NAMPO ALFA. In a week or so from now, you'll also see the videos, podcasts, all sorts of articles and social media to ensure that we reach the bigger pork industry. So thank you for making time to be here. To kick us off, we've invited 6 incredible thinkers, each with a wild dream for pork in South Africa. And these aren't your average panelists, they're visionaries. They blend science, they blend business, they blend storytelling, that will hopefully take us to what is possible. Each of them will share, as a kickoff, a short, punchy snapshot. It's part dream, part roadmap for how we can grow in this industry together. I'm going to introduce the panelists firstly, and then we'll kick off with the short presentations. Just next to me is Andrew Reeders. He's from Topics Northwin. He will unpack the business and economics of modern pig farming. Stephen Corbett, I've known him since he was a high school kid. He's from Agritistics, and he will show us how data and benchmarking can give farmers perfect visibility. A bit of a crystal ball for better decisions, I hope. Dr. Peter Evans needs very little introductions. These days he's with RMIS. I won't ask him or maybe I will. I can't promise about the thing that starts with an F and an M and a D. But he's with RMIS, and he will share what it means to be kinder to animals and the welfare standards that consumers demand and that retailers now expect. From the Flying Pig and Mockford Farms, Sean Mockford, he will explore how science shapes tenderness, flavors, quality. It's the journey from science to chops, I would like to believe. We'll also hear from Stefan Vermaak. He's the Chief Operating Officer for Escort, and he will speak about consumer trust and taste, and how consumer trust and taste can make pork the top choice in South Africa's kitchens. And finally, the mythbuster herself. You really should be following her on Instagram. Enrique Maria, she's from Agritistics Agri. She'll tackle consumer misconceptions about pork, safety, fat, hormones. Nothing's off the table. Andrew, let's kick off with you. Welcome.
Thank you, Ivor. You shoot me with my own. Yeah, just to start off, what is my wild dream? I think my wild dream doesn't end and start in South Africa, but it's for the continent of Africa. And that would be to produce enough high-quality, affordable pork to feed its own people.
I think we're going to start with the lights off. Somebody found the button. Thank you.
Yeah, just to start off in how to feed its own people, to produce its own pork, to do that consistently, sustainably, and also profitably. I think that's also important. Yeah, you also mentioned your introduction is, can pork be part of our daily lives? And just for some context, and that's part of my presentation as well, to build a roadmap, I think we need to also understand where we are and to know where we are going. But pork remains the most consumed protein in the world. About 40% of global protein is pork. Ivor, if you can move maybe to the next slide for me. I've just listed some challenges that the South African pork industry is facing. And pork consumption is one of them. It's very low in many African countries. In South Africa, for example, we only consume about 5.7 kilograms of pork per person per year. And this is due to cultural beliefs, spending power, market access, and also competition with other affordable protein sources such as chicken. Yeah, there are also distribution constraints. We have a fragmented value chain and restricted market access. Cold chain management is one, for example, along with the lack of supporting infrastructure in Africa, such as feed mills, premixes, veterinary services, and also formal retail outlets. Although Africa has a large and relatively cheap labor force, the challenge is finding people with the correct skills and the education to work in our value chain. Both consumers and also investors face financial constraints. Consumers lack spending power to afford protein, while investors have faced capital expenditure challenges when building new facilities and also supporting infrastructure. And then, you didn't want to say it, but it's listed last, but health and biosecurity is really important. And we need to invest to safeguard our health and execute the biosecurity on military precision. If you can maybe for the next slide. Is also I've got some key trends in the South African and the African pork industry. Yeah, first one is consolidation of businesses in the industry. We observe that smaller producers cannot compete and survive. They are not necessarily taken over by larger producers and companies, but larger companies expand to fill the gaps left behind by these closures. Maybe just for the next one, I can just emphasize on that, and this is from SAPO on World of Pork, is that 19% of pork producers own 88% of the national herd. Then over on the next slide, on another trend, is what we see is that efficiencies are improving, especially over the last 10 years. There I've just shown the graph to say in the last 10 years, this is the number of pigs being slaughtered. Even though there's not an increase in our sow numbers, we see an increase on the number of slaughters, and not on this graph is not carcass weight, but we also saw that carcass weights are increasing, so efficiencies is contributing as well. And then the last trend is what we are facing is what I call a costly reality. We've got volatile input prices and also producer challenges. If you can maybe just move to the next one. On the left, you will see the volatility in our domestic carcass prices linked to some major events. It's then important to note that due to foot and mouth disease and African swine fever, we in South Africa cannot export to other global markets. This means that the pork that's produced in South Africa and Africa needs to be consumed in the countries. And logistical challenges from South Africa make it very difficult to export into other African countries. Yeah, so that is just what I wanted to share with you, where we are, to create some context, and I want to leave you with a closing statement is, despite these headwinds, I think also our outlook is still bright. Africa's population and protein demand is growing, and if we invest in skills, infrastructure and sustainable technology, like renewable energy, circular economic models, we can transform these challenges into lasting opportunities.
Thank you, Andrew, for sketching the context, but also a bit of perspective about what's needed for the way forward. Stefan, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. So we all know in a modern agriculture system, data is our hidden key in our back pocket that we have to be able to move forward with our farming operations. And we all collect data, and we know it's important, and we store it safely on an Excel sheet or in a logbook or somewhere safe in the office, and that's where it stays. Very rarely do we really look at our own on-farm data for informed decision making. We look at national trends, or we look at trends from big companies, but we struggle to look at our own data. And the only way to really move forward from our side is to look at these data that we're already collecting oftentimes to make informed decisions on where we can really make improvements bit by bit. Now, a blunt pencil will always beat a sharp memory. That's a fact. So we have to collect the data, but it's not valuable until we analyze or use it to make these decisions. For example, I set up a scenario where we're looking at a few different factors that have an influence on the standard commercial pig farm. Now, for this scenario, the average feed price was at around 6,500 Rand per ton, and this was still done on the pork price of 32 Rand, which we have seen now, the recent SAPO reports, is climbing steadily to very good-looking prices coming ahead. Now, in the first scenario, as you can see, they're born alive of 14, pre-wean mortality 14%, post-wean 5%, yield replacement rate of 50%, litter index 2.35, which brings us to an average of around 1,300 margin over feed cost. If we only improve our born alive from 14 to 14.5, this is an extra 76,300 Rand in our pocket, in looking at margin over feed cost per month on a 1,000 sow unit. Now it feels small, yes, but only half a piglet extra. But this is the impact it has on a monthly basis in your own pocket. If we go back and we take pre-wean mortality from 14% down to 13%, that is 25,700 Rand extra in your pocket per month. The same, post-wean mortality from 5% down to 4.5% is 15,500. Yield replacement rate, just 5% lower, is an extra 9,900. So we can go on through a bunch of different factors. But if we are not collecting the data and analyzing it to turn it into usable information, we never know these figures for our own farms. We have a rough estimate, a good idea, but we don't have precise figures to work on and track improvement over time or the differences between our different sectors or units on our own farm. So and if we can do all 5 of these improvements, then it adds up to about 180,000 Rand increase in margin over profit per month. So these are really compounding effects that we see at the end result in our pockets. Practical tools on farm. We live in Africa. A lot of the technology is not adapted to our situations. The European countries don't know what load shedding is. They don't know what water outages is. They don't have a lot of the problems that we struggle with. But basic things to start with are notebooks and calendars and wall charts to visually see, but this is where I'm at with this group, with this group, with this group, with this group. That also makes your planning easier because it's a visual reminder on a daily basis of what is the next step. What am I working towards? Using simple things like a scale or calipers that can even be shared between units depending on the scale of the farm helps us to collect these data points, and it's easy. It's not a very difficult or intricate procedure, but it can be. We have set up systems where we link a scale with an RFID tag. Every time the sow walks over that scale, it automatically uploads the data to the database. No human involvement, no typing errors, automatically, no labor cost. And then the basic thing, ear tags or some form of individual identification. Because it's good to know this sow weighs 300 kilograms, but the next phase, or a few weeks later, we need to be able to track, but what was her growth? And how does that correspond to later production? So we have to, and I know a lot of farmers already have this, but we need an individual identification to be able to track our own data and turn it into usable information. And there's a bunch of things that we can track. And different technologies available. Offline first apps that you can input data, and then later when you get to the office where there's Wi-Fi, it automatically syncs and backs up the data. And where to start? We all have this big daunting task ahead of us, but we have to start somewhere. Choosing one parameter that we want to focus on, make sure that we get accurate data that is usable and that we can track over time to see our improvements. Test different methods and see what effects that have. So choosing one record to track better, using one tool extra each time until you see the improvement, and then you can decide to add another one. But focus on mastering one thing at a time, and then set your one goal to reach before you move on to the next one. Otherwise, this daunting task simply remains impossible. Automated records is where it becomes nice. I know a lot of us know the World of Pork or Pork 360 page with all of those statistics. That is possible for on-farm data as well. If you have your data collection set up correctly, where it uploads, these types of graphs can automatically generate. Every half an hour, the updated data gets pulled through. And that's where we want to go, because that's real-time on-farm decision-making based on your own data for improvement. The future is not in the gadgets. It is in using the data that we often already collect and have available historically to make informed decisions on our own farms for improvement.
Thank you so much, Stefan. It's incredible to see how farming in general, not just pig farming, has become a game of science, but also increasingly of data. Sean, you're up next.
Good morning, everyone. Just from the start, I am at no means a scientist at all, but it's just unbelievable how much science goes into the breeding and creating better and better pork quality. But before we go into that, I just want to give a bit of a background from our side. I come from a farm called Markford Farms, just outside Polokwane. which goes back to 1953 when my grandfather came onto the farm. So I'm very proud to be a third generation farmer. The farm actually started as a dairy farm, but was later developed into a pig farm, and in the years to come grew into one of the larger pig farms in the Limpopo province. We have around 2,000 pigs, 2,000 sows on the farm, which equates to 20,000 pigs that we need to feed and manage daily. Our main aim is to grow the pigs as quickly as possible in the best conditions possible for the pigs. We also produce genetic replacement stock for our commercial farms, as well as our customers. The invention of the flying pig, this came about back in 2018 when one of our abattoirs that we were supplying most of our pigs to had an outbreak of listeriosis, and was a major crash to our marketing, and we realized that we had too many eggs in one basket and needed to mitigate it. And this brought about the invention of the flying pig. We also had a curious passion and interest in value adding of pork and finding a more streamlined way to get pork to our customers as well as the housewife. Our pigs are raised in a manner where the pigs come first in terms of welfare, health, housing, feed, and management. We also abide by a strict pork 360 quality assurance system. We also have a share and a watchful eye in an abattoir where we know the pigs are slaughtered in a humane manner. Distribution has caused quite a lot of upsets. We miss the days where we could send 1,000 pigs off to our customer in Gauteng, and marketing thereafter became the issue. But we've managed to build up quite a few ways of getting pork around, and we have one little fleet with the famous logo, "We deliver chop chop," and then we also make use of couriers along the way. So at the moment we've built up to about 80,000 kilograms that we get out to happy customers every week. Some of the customers' favorites is pork neck gammon, the honey glazed pork belly roll, and the marinated loin chops. So it comes down to what's the key to actually always getting the best pork time after time. And on the farm side, genetics play a massive role. We are spoiled with three amazing genetic companies in South Africa that all emphasize the importance of meat quality. But also important to make sure that Jurek is part of the picture, as they've been proven to improve meat quality. Pigs should be raised in the best stress-free possible situation. Nutrition should never be compromised, as it plays about 50% of the end result. Make sure you always use the highest quality raw materials, and work with a nutritionist to make sure you are getting the best food, being well balanced with all the micro and macronutrients to the right pig at the right time. Environment, buildings need to be well ventilated and insulated to be able to handle the hot summers and the cold winters. Younger pigs should be comfortable with the warm microclimate. They should also have ample access to fresh food and water. Pigs should also be pampered as much as possible along the way, with good stockmanship instinctive to keep the pigs as stress-free as possible, with extra TLC where possible. From the gate to the consumer, make sure the pigs are transported in the calmest possible manner. Stress-free offloading is crucial. There's no rush here. Lairage space, which is the holding facilities, and care should be overemphasized. The stunning process should be instant and effective, taking away any unneeded stress. And then the sooner the carcasses are in the chilling rooms, the better. Under an hour is favorable. pH of the meat is a crucial factor and has a great effect on meat quality. The pH should drop from around 7 to 5.5 and over a 6-hour time period. Just from our genetic supply standpoint, we are lucky that we've tied in with a Danish company, and just a couple of stats from their side. In 2030, the world will have 1 billion more mouths to feed. By 2035, the demand for pork, which is already the highest consumed protein, is expected to increase by as much as 45%. With Danish pork in demand internationally, Dan-bred pigs are used all over the world in different climates, and ensuring local production close to consumers, and increasing access to high-quality pork globally. Dan-bred finishers have a well-documented high potential for uniform, superior meat quality in terms of non-sensitive to stress, intramuscular fat for tenderness and flavor, pH, water holding capacity and drip loss, meat color, and lean meat content. Optimum level of Dan-bred's breeding goals include the lean meat percentage, and the finishers have an optimum level of around 60%, which the industry considers ideal. It's important that the animals have long displayed optimum level, and the continued inclusion of lean meat percentage in the breeding goals ensures the presence of optimum levels are maintained. Lean meat percentage is not only the only goal, but it continues to be part of the breeding to keep up with world demands of carcasses going heavier. pH is an important part, as mentioned. In pH, it expresses the acidity of the liquid, which constitutes most of the muscle, affects water holding capacity, and thus drip loss. Live pig muscles have a pH of about 7, and when rigor sets in, the pH will have fallen to 5.5. Just a couple of numbers of pork consumption per capita around the world. Hong Kong sitting at 52, Germany 43, our friends in Australia and New Zealand are at 28 and 18, and we unfortunately at a lower point of 4.5. But luckily with our friends at SAPA, that they do a great amount of work in consumer awareness and education, and a lot of pork promotion for consumers to understand just what a value-added pork is. And they do this with means of recipes that's widely available, with recipes that really get the point of making pork look pretty. They also have a lot of social awareness out there, just so that more and more consumers can realize how great pork is. They've also worked with universities just to debunk a couple of myths along the way, and I think which has largely led to a great 10% increase. 20% of increase over the last 10 years of pork. Just something for interest's sake, we have a vulture restaurant on the farm, which is such a nice symbiotic relationship between us. They clean up all of our pigs that didn't get to go to the market. And so we have about 400 or 150 vultures visiting on a daily basis, and it's nice to know that they are definitely pork fans. So just to close, I think as farmers we are faced with many challenges, but luckily we are resilient and here to stay in producing excellent pork quality. Thank you.
Thank you. So Sean started out by saying he's not a scientist, but he's talking pH levels. Last night at dinner, somebody was whispering in my ear, saying he's got the lekkerste varkvleis wat jy ooit kan eet. And now I hear it's because you're pampering them. Dr. Peter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ivor. I think Andrew opened up quite nicely talking about the economics and the difficulties around feed prices, pork prices. So the challenges pig farmers face, the incredible capital investment that needs to go into pig farms. The other big pressure on pig farmers is of a social nature. And I'm going to address one of them, which is the welfare. But the other social pressure is the effect that farming has on the environment. The concerns around waste into the environment, of gas emissions and so on. And we won't touch on those, but that's an important consideration to have. So we can address a lot of the economic things. We can ride the waves of ups and downs. Andrew showed you a really good graph of the difficulties the pig industry has had in the last 8 to 9 years with listeria and droughts, with feed prices, geopolitical tensions, etc., FMD, to mention a few. But when we talk about welfare, it's something that we all need to address. Ultimately, pig farmers feel very, very affronted when somebody talks about their welfare. You've just heard Sean saying the most important thing on their farm is their pigs. And all of us as farmers, I'm also a farmer, I have a little pig farm about 25 k's from here in Viljoenskroon. We all think we care about our pigs. But what we need to realize is that society is changing. Urbanization is becoming a real factor. So people, the majority of our consumers are now disconnected from animals, from farm animals. And so whatever they hear around welfare makes them concerned because they don't have first-hand experience. So I really just want to leave you with three messages. Is there's an objective measure of welfare. We can talk about the number of square meters that a grower pig has or a weaner pig has. We can talk about the actual type of housing we've created for our sows, whether it's group housing, those are objective things, we can measure them. The subjective thing is, as I said earlier, a lot of our consumers are people who have pets, and they cuddle and love their pets, and the pets have got beds. And that's what they're kind of expecting us to be creating on pig farms. I saw an article coming out of Pig Progress, which is an international pig museum, of a new kind of farm, designed farm in Germany, where you can see there's a lot of bedding, and a lot of good pig farmers will tell you the hygiene and keeping pigs clean is important, to have solid floors, to have slatted floors, and bedding is potentially an issue. It's also potentially a biosecurity issue. With foot and mouth disease around, for instance, just think about it. If you had, were bringing in bedding that had maybe been contaminated with a virus, African swine fever has also been known to be transmitted with bedding, it's an issue. So those are the kind of statements, type of discussions we need to have with the public at large, so that they understand why we do things the way we do it. So objective versus subjective, we need to keep that in mind. LSM dynamics. So one of the statements that gets made often is we have a lot of people in lower LSM groups who really couldn't care how their meat comes as long as their meat is cheap. So SAPO in collaboration, or Zoetis, on behalf of SAPO, and also information was repeated, research was repeated with one or two of the welfare organizations, where they went into some of the areas where there are poorer people and asked them a question around welfare. And surprisingly, for a lot of us, maybe, it doesn't matter really what group of people you're in from a wealth category. Everybody really cares about their animals. They care about how we look after them. So the fact that we think we need to produce in volume and nobody will care because we'll be able to sell volumes of cheap pork, that's a bit of a myth, and we should forget that. Let's talk a little bit about the retailers. And I'll jump to the next, okay, let's jump to it like that. I'll give you that now, I don't need any more. So the retailers, I think a lot of people get really, I saw in my brief Kinder to Sows, which is related to one particular retailer. We also have crate-friendly programs and so on. The retailers, you must understand, are people who sell to the consumer. So the retailers don't make up their mind what they want. The consumer, the people who buy their products, or buy our products through them, because they're really just a conduit, they tell them what they want. And for the retailers, the most important thing for them is their reputation. They want to protect their brand, that retail brand, and it doesn't matter which one. Look, there are some that are less caring than others, but it doesn't matter where you are. So, and we're not going to delve into food safety and things, but food safety, the origin of the farms is an important, but how those animals are raised are important to them. So, the last point I want to make on this whole welfare issue is transparency. So we heard it a number of times. I was in a forum meeting with the UAE yesterday. Obviously, we weren't talking pork. We might have been talking beef. But one of the things that came up over and over again is trust and integrity and transparency. So those are the things that matter to them. And unfortunately, in the modern world we live in, people cannot say, or you can say it, but people are not going to believe you. So Pork 360, which is, I think one of the most important projects that the pork producer organization has, that SAPO has, is a system of being able to audit farmers on welfare standards, amongst others, and to be able to say, you've got a Pork 360 certificate, you adhere to our standards. It's independently audited. And those are the kind of things that the consumer wants. And they don't need you to throw it into their face. From the retailer point of view, they take that as a standard. That's the standard that we expect you to have your products. You don't have to tell them. That the consumer, already in the back of his mind, expects that that retailer has those standards in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that. I honestly didn't know that even people in the most poor communities have the same expectations of the agricultural sector. So kicking off some myth busting there, which leads us beautifully into consumer expectations. Enrique.
Thank you. So yes, I do consumer education, but by profession, I'm a scientist, and I love sustainability. That's what my research is about. So I want to briefly look at the lens through which the consumer views the product, and that lens, my dream is that would be a scientific lens. But first, we need to look at what the science says. The science says that smoking is healthy. I mean, look at it. The doctors recommend it, right? The science says that the earth is flat. That's a fact. And now please know that I am sarcastic and definitely kidding. Those are not facts, but those two items were facts many years ago until the science changed. And I want you to think about that when you think about science and the message that comes through to consumers. And just like that, there are many questions and viewpoints out there that change the way that the consumer and even scientists view the facts that are there, that businesses and policymakers view it. So just a few questions. How many animals are killed for food each year? Now, you don't have to answer. One of the facts going out is 80 billion are slaughtered annually. Now, imagine 80 billion, it looks like this just vast amount of land, and it's eating all of the human food, and it's pollution everywhere. And yes, the fact remains 80 billion are slaughtered annually. But if you know that 73 billion of that are chickens, then it kind of minimizes the amount of land being used. And chicken are still animal, but they have a 6-week cycle. So at one point in time, there are not 80 billion animals on this earth being slaughtered right now. You understand where I'm getting at? What percentage of agricultural land is used for livestock production? Now, of all the agricultural land, 80% of that goes to livestock. But imagine this being the arable land out there. Okay, or not the arable land, the agricultural land. Only that small portion, the Doelane area, is suitable for cropland. The rest are simply too hilly or rocky or just not suitable for crop production. And of that, only a third actually goes to human food, meaning the edible portion of the food. The rest is crop byproducts or unarable component. So what happens to the rest of the agricultural land? And tell me if a human can eat the maize stalk, for example, or the discarded or rejected corn that didn't reach human consumption levels. That can go to animals. So again, if you look at what percentage actually goes to livestock, the picture changes when you look at it from a different angle. What is livestock's contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions? Not even the science knows, because some sources say 14.5% greenhouse gas. Of that, 20% is carbon, But other sources say, oh, actually, we were wrong. It's actually 11.1%. But none of these sources consider the warming effect of carbon versus methane. Carbon has a very long half-life, so it keeps its heating effect for centuries, whereas methane has a very short-lived period. It has a high-intensity warming effect, and then it degrades, and the overall warming effect is essentially nullified, but that isn't mentioned in the science. I like this one. How much protein is recommended per day by like the people that make our diet plans and such? Some of the recommendations say 45 grams of protein. Some say 56. Some say 70. I've never seen more than 90 grams of protein per day, but I can assure you that in this room, we've all probably had that amount just for breakfast. But now the interesting thing is the recommendations say of that, the majority should come from plant-based sources because it's healthier. Now, I want to show you something. On the left-hand side, global protein supply by country. Okay, the red is, the darker the color, the more the supply. On the right-hand side, the share of animal source protein. Of the amount of protein supply, on the right-hand side, how much actually comes from animals. So you can see it's sort of similar. The more protein supply, the more it comes from animals, the higher the protein supply. But now look at this. On the right-hand side there, you have childhood growth stunting. See the inverse relationship there, where the darker colors on the childhood growth stunting side, the areas with the most childhood growth stunting, are also the areas with the least amount of animal-sourced protein. But they tell me plant-based protein is the healthiest. Okay? And here's a fact listed by science. Saturated fat causes heart disease. But in many, many recent articles, there are linkages with dairy, whole-fat dairy. I know this is a pork discussion, but I just love this. Whole-fat dairy and cardiovascular health. It has a neutral or inverse effect. In other words, full-fat dairy has shown to have either neutral or a protective effect for heart health, yet the science claims that saturated fat causes heart disease. So what happens is that we have all the science underneath the surface, and what happens on farm underneath the surface, a small portion of that goes to businesses and policymakers, the retailers, and whoever writes the regulations. And only the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg gets carried through consumers. And this sounds very daunting, but I'd like to turn this horrible scene around and say, just tilt it and realize that what gets to the consumer and to the businesses and the policymakers is simply the lens that they view it through. And we can change that lens with communication, with effective communication. And I love this. The important thing in science is not so much getting new facts, but finding new ways of thinking about it. The science can change for pork as well. And here, it's difficult to read now here, but some of the recent reviews also analyze pork as part of a sustainable food system. And what's wonderful about it is the higher income a country gets, the more they develop economically, the more animal protein consumption rises, including pork. Pork is one of the first protein sources to rise. So even in the global reviews on pork consumption, pork is sort of recommended, and I want to say inevitable, in economic growth of a country. So as long as we just keep thinking about our consumer, keep producing a safe, quality product, we can change the science for pork. And we will do that through communication, which is transparent, accurate, neutral, and sincere, directed towards our consumer, not from a defensive position, because we do not have anything to defend. And the most important fact is we need to be bold, we need to be truthful, we need to be brave enough to communicate it, and quite frankly, I think the pork industry needs to make some noise. Thank you.
And that's why we're here today. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Right, I'm live. Ava, thank you. You know, we at Escort ask ourselves the question every single day is, how are we going to get more pork on the consumer's plate? That is our business, and we've been in that for 108 years now. So we think that we know a bit about that. I think what is important for us is we are of the opinion that we should position pork as an affordable, everyday red meat. And if you look at the figures, in South Africa, people eat around 34 kilograms of chicken per individual every year, 34 kilograms. Beef, around about 12.2 kilograms, and we have moved up from about 4.4 to about 5.7 kilos of pork at this moment. So what are we going to do? We need to take market share from beef, and we need to take market share from chicken. And if we talk affordability, it is very easy to actually compete against beef, and we are. But when we talk about chicken, that is very difficult because of the fact that chicken is a very cheap protein, and we need to understand that. So for us, it is very important to understand our end consumer per LSM group, because different LSM groups eat differently. And we will have to penetrate the markets where we are not strong at the moment. And unfortunately, pork is not strong in the lower LSM groups. They eat a lot of chicken every single day. So we need to concentrate on the lower LSM groups if we want to eat into the chicken market. We must understand that the retail will not drive shelf space or visibility for us. That is on us. And we will need to work extremely hard on that. And our view is that we will be able to do that if we can offer a wider product range, and we will get to that later. But new product development for us is very important and something that we need to focus on every day. Saying that, I think that we're doing an excellent job, and we want to thank SAPO for the effort that they put in marketing our product on a daily basis. And then the processes like Escort also spends a lot of effort on marketing, and I will show a few slides on that later. But for us, bottom line is look at the different LSMs and what they want and focus on the product range.
Thank you. So the next part is where we test some of the big, bold ideas that were shared here by the panel. And maybe we can switch on the lights so you can see those of us that are a bit darker. So the next section is called the consumer-backed discussion, because instead of starting on the farm, we're starting where the pork journey ends, and that's on the plate. The question is, what do consumers really want from pork? And how do we as an industry meet those expectations then through science, data, welfare, good business decisions? Enrique, I'm going to throw this ball to you because it links so beautifully to what we've just heard. Speaking about consumers, busting myths, tackling perceptions out there. If we talk about a bigger dream, how can we get more South Africans to see pork as a safe, lean, healthy, everyday choice? I mean, it's a great source of protein. We heard it from your talk and so many others. But there seems to be a lot of misconceptions about pork.
Absolutely, and I think if we first look at what some of those misconceptions are, of course it is the safety component. Although a lot of effort has been done in the past to rectify some of the mistakes and misconceptions of the past, there's still this unknowing thing of, or this question underlying, is pork really safe? And frankly, I think it's an understanding problem. You know, I'm not 100% convinced that the consumer fully understands what happened in the past and what is currently happening. And that is, I love the word transparency that was used in the introductions today, is if farmers and producers and the distributors and the retailers can communicate transparently what is really going on, I personally believe that the consumer will feel safe enough to start gaining trust in the people. And that's also a very important factor. It's people. No story and first-hand, maybe second-hand experience, word of mouth, can achieve what a logo company campaign can achieve. If you get real people to tell stories, real farmers, real consumers, to show that what they are consuming is enjoyable, it is safe, you know, no negative consequences. If you get farmers to share what's really going on farm behind the scenes, then a lot of those myths can already be debunked simply by communicating, because we don't have anything to hide. And that's where distrust comes from, is why aren't you willing to share? You know, so I think that's the first point. But secondly, consistently providing a quality product. So that's already a tick box. The product on the table is quality, it is safe. I have my own opinion about whether we want to communicate pork as lean, because with fat comes flavor. So maybe that's a question on why do we want it to be lean? Why do we want to have consumer-driven agriculture? It's quite risky, in my opinion, to follow the trends of the consumer. Yes, we value the consumer as a person, because we are all people. I'm a consumer myself. I would love to know that people are providing what I want and desire. But as a farmers, you can also be confident about what you are producing and educate the consumer on why we have intramuscular fat. How does that translate to nutrient quality? If you take PIC topics versus Dan bread, some consumers will prefer the one over the other. And I think it's beautiful that we are supplying to a diverse consumer need, but in that standardization and talking about, let's say, the lean component, I personally don't think is necessary. So twisting that and turning it into pork is sexy. Pork is, you know, it's something, it's festive, it's quality, it's also red meat. It's something that should be on every grilled section in a menu. If we can start doing that and putting pork on the table as just a beautiful lacquer product, while communicating transparently how it's produced, I think we're one step ahead in getting there.
But if you want to make pork sexy and if you want to turn it into something more than just used on special occasions, you know, turn it into everyday, then we have to tackle some of these old myths. Pork being fatty, as you just said, pork being unsafe, full of hormones. In terms of strategies, what's some of the best ways to tackle these myths? You spoke about communication. How do you see it?
Well, that is something that I try to do personally on social media. A lot of the consumers are on social media. So just simply showing them, telling them, breaking the science down into small biteable pieces where we simply explain what is going on behind the scenes. So I think using influencers, using thought leaders, science communicators to give the message from farm to fork is a brilliant strategy, and social media has been proven to work. But I also want to see a mic and a camera in the farmer's hands, because people like me tell the story maybe of science, which is, I can tell it from a first-hand experience, the scientific component, but I can only tell the farmer's story from a second-hand experience. I can go interview the farmer and ask them about what they are doing, but the best told story is from the farmer themselves. So personally, I think a good strategy would be for the farmers to start building their own brands. People love to know people. Hiding behind a logo is sort of sketchy for people. People want to see more authenticity. Even in the trends on social media, the people that excel are the people who are just real. And I think we don't have to be scared to be real. So that's my personal idea is get a mic and a camera behind every vet and farmer and statistician, as many as you can.
And maybe while you've got the microphone, and since you're looking from the outside in, how can farmers and maybe the industry keep up with all the misinformation about the pork industry spreading so fast on social media? It's really difficult for ordinary people, non-experts, to keep up.
Absolutely, and it is quite daunting. But since I'm going to look at my own experience, since I wanted to start my channel at the end of 2023, and when I actually started actively implementing it a few months ago, the scenery already changed. in those 2 years only, people have gone from animal sourced foods are just horrible and it causes X, Y, Z to every third person trying the carnivore diet. So I think, again, it is dangerous to hop on trends. And because the pork industry is already supplying a quality product and continuously improving, continuously measuring themselves, I would not say we would have to keep up with any misinformation, because that misinformation changes on a daily basis. I think the issue is the misinformation comes from not enough communication happening. So as long as let's say the 100 of farmers doing it right, keep communicating what they do, putting their story out there, one outlier case of a farmer doing it wrong will either fade and be overcrowded with the good stories, or all those farmers right will also be able to comment, because let's face it, not all farmers do it right. But that is why we have experts over here, is to say this is how we can do it. And I know all of these experts would be able to comment on any viral video of some horrible, horrible farm condition and say, listen, this is not how we do it, and this is why we don't do it that way. So I think if we continue, again, consistently and transparently communicating, then there's no reason to keep up with any trends, because the truth will prevail eventually.
Sean, maybe if we could pivot to you. Your business is a great example of how science connects directly to the consumer expectation in terms of taste, tenderness, quality. Maybe a question about ensuring consistent quality. How realistic is it even to deliver pork that's consistently tender, juicy, consistently tasty every time? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I think it's a loaded question, and I think it also really depends on, I mean, you can get a very consistent pork if you keep going back to the same good retailers that do it well. But I think if you're going to be picking and choosing from different retailers, and I think some retailers just don't get it right, some abattoirs just don't get it right. So there's a few key players along that line that might just unfortunately upset the apple cart in the sense of quality to the consumers. But I mean, there's really good retailers there, so I think if you're sticking to the same retailers, you've got a very good chance of having consistent, high-quality pork.
What are the key factors, though? The key, continue.
No, sorry. I think just to relate back to Enrique about the leanness, and I just wanted to say we agree 100%. I think it is just that conception of going from this very fatty pork chop, you know, and now it's just to sort of bring it down to an awesome 22 millimeter fat that's lovely to have on there, and then we're sort of putting the flavors and with the marbling in the meat, you know, and that's what we're sort of focusing on. But I agree 100%. We've never wanted to go too lean, and the fats is really the desirable part of pork as well.
So what are the key factors from feed to handling that have the biggest impact on the pork's tenderness and flavors from your perspective, as somebody who says he's not a scientist but delivers these amazing products?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that really starts from under the mother, where the piglets are that age, and it's that whole process, and it's actually, you know, the feed, the environment, and then just, you know, if they're getting stressed already at that young age, that really does correlate to having a negative impact onto the pigs. And then also through to the abattoir, I mean, we can be the best farmers, we can do everything we can feed them all the right food. But if they're stressed at the abattoirs and they're overloaded and they've been sort of pushed through too quickly, or they're hanging out too long, it can have really a negative effect. So it's a whole chain from farm to fork, and essentially, you know, it's pre-gate and then post-gate as well. A lot of different factors.
So maybe for some of the producers in the room or those watching the live stream, how can producers ensure that the science at farm level actually translate into a great tasting experience for consumers? What is it that producers can do to ensure that the consumer gets a great tasting experience?
Yeah, I think that there's so many factors in that as well. I think it is just raising the pigs right, feeding them right, and then also just know where they're ending up, and making sure they've sort of been well looked after the gate, and yeah, that they get it right post gate. Yeah, I think that's key to it all.
Dr. Evans, maybe if we could pivot to you on this whole topic of consumer trust. what does genuine consumer trust in pork look like to you, and how can assurance, welfare, health programs help build that kind of consumer trust?
Sure, Arva, put me on the spot. I think in any relationship, it's a two-way street. So one needs to be able to, and it's fantastic, we've got someone who's on social media who's becoming a friend of the pork industry. But if you don't know what the issue is, you can't address it, and the direct issue. So I think we went through an exercise at SAPO, oh goodness me, 5-6 years ago, where we engaged with some of our counterparts, other organizations in Europe and Australia. And number one thing is the transparency. And Enrique was talking about, a camera on a farm. And most of our farmers have been, and are probably still, very cautious of having people look inside their buildings. So one of the things that's happened over time, particularly in the pig industry, is with biosecurity, there are fences around, people can't get onto farms. And the part of the misconception around that is that you're trying to keep them out because you don't want them to see what you're doing. So we need to invite the consumer into our farms. We need to invite them in. We need to, and there are some, from a welfare point of view, there's some production things that are done, like docking a tail, which the consumer finds very difficult to understand, because the conversation has been formed by the welfare organizations. It's not been formed by the farmers saying, this is why I do it, this is how carefully I do it, this is how empathetically I do it, and the process hasn't really caused, it doesn't really cause pain. It's discomfort maybe for a few seconds, and you show the public that, and you say, listen, we're doing this, and you're not saying we don't do it, or we don't want you to see that we're doing something. So I think it's important that that you open. There are always going to be, society is a spectrum. There are always going to be people who are, doesn't matter what you tell them, how you formulate your story, who are going to be anti it. But as long as the majority of society and particularly your consumers are comfortable that you really care for your animals, some of the things that do the social rounds are people who don't do normal practices or look after their animals well. We've seen videos of people throwing piglets across from one pen to another. That's bad. But you can't judge the whole industry on a couple of poor individuals. The only way you can do that is tell your story. While you were talking just now, it reminded me, and I don't know how many times we've heard, and I say the saying, I'm sure you all tell me who it was. They taste so good because they eat so good. Who was that? Farmer Brown. Here we go. And those are the kind of things that we need to do. So, yeah.
An apple a day keeps the doctor away. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Iver, if I can come in there, I think that as processors, we get excellent pigs from our farms, and we must turn that excellent pigs into excellent pork, and that is, and that is the processor's responsibility. And I think that there are a lot of good processors out there that do it consistently every single day. And I think our other issue is that we must understand, and it was mentioned, it is important that it doesn't matter who buys your pork in what LSM group. All the LSM groups want a quality, safe product on the plate. Don't think because I cannot afford the most expensive cut, I don't care about quality and safety. I think that is important.
Maybe since I've got you now, let's talk about competitive choice. Do you have some suggestions for strategies that can help position pork as a top protein choice for South African consumers. What would be the strategies that you would be looking at Escort?
Yeah, I think I spoke about new product development, and we focus a lot on that. And a lot of effort goes into that. But there are different products also for very specific different LSM groups. Like on the value-added side, a huge opportunity still for the higher LSM levels. But if you look at the informal market and the spaza shops, totally different market, totally different products that you can actually put in there. It could be cheaper cuts, cheaper packaging, etc. So I think it's all about pitching the right product to the right LSM group and knowing exactly what they want either.
It's interesting because I do follow some of the new trends that Escort communicates to the media. New products, interesting things like vorsies with chilies and before the Bride Day campaigns, etc. Client expectations, how do you see it and how do you manage it?
I think, and Peter just mentioned it now, that affordability is probably the biggest thing that we must make sure of. And if you give clients a affordable pork product, they will buy it. And the expectations not necessarily always said, back to safety and back to quality as well. And then it was also mentioned, animal welfare is very, very important. And you must make sure that you on top of animal welfare. At this stage, there's a lot of talk in the industry about sows and crates and electrical stunning and CO2 stunning. Just make sure that you do the right thing. And 99% of all of the farmers and the processors are actually doing the right thing.
Stefan, let's take the conversation back to data, telling the story that people don't often see unless you see it on a dashboard. How can real-time dashboards change the way farmers make decisions every day? I meet a lot of farmers, they just want to farm. Many of them will tell you, ek het nie tyd vir die goed nie. But how does it change the game?
Ivor, I think when we look at our farm, we often just follow big trends. And like I said in my intro as well, when we start looking at specific criteria, where are our strengths and our weaknesses, benchmarking ourselves over time or benchmarking ourselves against other farms, where can we make the biggest impact, the quickest, or with the least amount of input? And I highlighted a few points there which are critical factors in a farm that have a big influence on the overall production and profitability of a farm. And you're only able to see those and the effects that your changes that you make have when you are tracking that through visuals. If you are comparing one feed with another feed, you only see that when you're collecting the data and actually plotting that data on a graph. And the same, whether you're testing feed or genetics or a new water treatment to improve your water quality or heat stress during summer months or winter months, what is your farm's optimal operating point can be seen through these kind of live visuals from farm data.
But can farm level data help build consumer confidence and trust in South African pork, or is it just something that benefits the producer?
I think it can. When we go back to something like welfare, something that the consumer must understand, welfare is of importance to the farmer, not only because of the ethical responsibility we have, but also because of an economical responsibility. One way of ensuring great pork or good quality is by ensuring good welfare. Like Sean mentioned, if we take care of our animals, we get a better product. And by tracking something like gain or the morbidity or mortality status on our farms and saying, but yes, look at what we are achieving. We are achieving higher born lives because our animals are in a better overall condition. We are achieving lower mortality rates. Our animals are staying in the herd longer because they are under less stress. We are taking care of them. We can show that to the consumer and they can see, but this is actually what's happening on farm.
So what are the biggest barriers for farmers using data, and how can small farmers benefit equally, or is data a game for the more larger producer?
I think a big part of data is to get reliable and clean data. If I take, most of my time goes into taking existing data and cleaning it up. So implementing systems where either it's a visual error where you read a number wrong, or a typing error, basic human errors that corrupts data, which makes it difficult to readily use data and automated processes, is a very big hurdle in our farming industry, as we often work with unskilled labor, or we are in a hurry because there's a large number of animals that we have to process within a certain time. Looking to the smaller size farms, it's difficult because a lot of the more sophisticated systems are expensive and technology, but we have a lot of technology already. Show me a person that doesn't have a smartphone. I mean, basic data collection can be done on many devices. Even if it is done on hand, calculations can be done through these various options or through apps. There's a bunch of data collection and tracking software available where you can input basic data and it auto-generates it on your phone. You don't need a big expensive computer, or you don't need expensive equipment. You can use a smaller scale. You can use different methods of sharing equipment or using smaller scale down versions for these smaller farms.
Let's talk about financial stability, if you don't mind. What does a financially sustainable pig industry look like in terms of practical terms, and how can farmers then balance the short-term profits versus long-term growth?
Yes, I think it starts with being a sustainable industry is that there should be a balance on supply and demand. I think that's a big driver in our pork prices, and that is what our farmers get paid at. So as soon as we see there's an oversupply, we can definitely see that in our pork prices, and that leads to the volatility that we see in our prices as well, and our profitability as pig farmers. I think the second one we need to look at is with the genetics, the modern genetics that we've got on our farms, is to be able to unlock the potential of that genetics. And those small incremental improvements every day leads to being more efficient. That efficiencies at the end leads to profits as well. I don't think there's such a thing as a short-term profits. If you're in the big industry, it's for the long term. But I believe that's where it lies.
Andrew, I think it must be incredibly difficult to be a producer, and then you have to align, on the one hand, the farm level economics, and on the other hand, the changing consumer patterns, the changing consumer expectations. How does one even do that?
Yeah, I think it comes to the mindset and the realization of a pig producer that the consumers are voting with their wallets. And as producers, we need to adapt our business models to include animal welfare and sustainability. A lot has been said about animal welfare today, but sustainability is another concept for the future that we can look at, because there's some economic values there as well. But that should become part of our business model. And that being said, being part of your business model, it also aids in being more efficient on the farm. The general well-being of the animals can lead to increased production on the farm as well.
Maybe just to wrap up this thought, let's chat about barriers, challenges. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing farmers, and how can they prepare or adapt for it?
Yeah, I think a big challenge is maybe let's take it back to our inputs. Our inputs is grains, which is 70% of the cost. So what we see as trends as well is farmers, big farmers are, if they're not already integrated vertically, backwards integrated into crop farming, they're thinking in integrating backwards just to get a control over the costs.
Okay, great. Thank you. If you've just joined us here, you are at the Agritistics Spekgesprek in partnership with NAMPO ALFA, proudly sponsored by SAPO and Escort. And you're just in time because we're going to turn up the heat a little bit by taking questions from you, the audience. We've heard some of the dreamers, we've heard the data, and now it's time to maybe play a bit of devil's advocate, where we'll test some of these ideas and see how really tough it is. It's quite simple. It's quick fire questions, 1 or 2 minutes per answer, if you don't mind. Short, punchy responses. And we want to talk facts, friction, and maybe a few friendly fireworks as well. Let's see what pops up. If you are in the audience and you've got a question, raise your hand so I can see. Okay, let's kick off with you, sir. If you don't mind, there's a microphone at the back. Name, where you're from, question, and to who you're addressing it to.
Thanks, Ivor. Richard Kricher, Grain SA chairperson. The comment was made earlier about market share and taking from one commodity to another, stealing over commodity. I think ideally agriculture wants to see the growth and has the ability to kickstart the economy. That from a grains perspective, you being one of our clients, that we see the growth. Unfortunately, with the LSM and the poverty in this country, where people tend to move to a carbohydrate diet as opposed to a protein diet, we'd ideally like to see that consumers get work, the economy grows, that they move from that carbohydrate diet to the meat diet. If I look at the type of figures that we see coming out of America, 99 kilograms per capita. 58 kilograms chicken, beef, veal 26, pork 23 kilograms. If we look at Europe, about 83 kilograms per capita in Europe, with pork playing a very big role there. Ideally, we'd like to see that grow and grow the economy as opposed to try to steal market share from one another. I don't know if somebody wants to comment further on that. Thank you.
I think one thing, it was discussed on Thursday at the FIA Academy as well. A big part of the lack of growth, as was mentioned with the biosecurity issues currently in South Africa, is a lack of export in the pork market. And in general in our meat markets. Whereas in pork, we already have a very strict biosecurity protocol in place. The common diseases that plague our ruminant sectors is very rare in the monogastric sectors, because the diseases that we face, we have a lot more stringent practices in place, as mentioned with the fences, that we're trying to keep diseases out, not necessarily the popular view. So I think if we can get the export markets going, it will change a lot into growing markets rather than shifting markets. But it is a challenge, and one that we definitely have to address.
Stefan?
Yeah, I think if I can come in there, I don't think steal is the right word. But be that as it may, I think the issue that we've got in South Africa is our consumer spending ability, and there is only so much money going around, and the lowest LSM groups that is a huge part of our business and should be, has only got X amount of money in their wallet at any given time. And unfortunately, that leads to competition in the meat market, and we must accept that we are going to, as different industries think on our feet, and get into a situation where we can compete for for the little money that is available in the end consumer's wallet.
Dr. Evans, so if we're talking about consumer spending power, and I've heard you say early on that all LSMs care about the welfare of animals, but when it comes to price, people choose what's cheapest on the shelf. So maybe my question to you is, in all honesty now, will South Africans really pay more for welfare certified pork, or are we busy kidding ourselves here?
Ivor, do you want the short answer? Our answer is no. So I think one of the, I talked about a little bit about Pork 360 earlier, which obviously is welfare is a big component of it. The other components would be antibiotic residues, food safety, in short. We've tested markets, and it's not just South Africa. You can go to Britain, you can go to the States, you can go to Australia, wherever. Consumers don't pay extra for consumer assurance programs. It becomes a standard that they would potentially refuse your product, but they're not going to pay more for it. So unfortunately, it's your ticket to enter the game, consumer assurance. So yeah, that's a short answer.
Stefan, how do you see it at Escort?
Exactly the same, Ivor. I think we know that no one will actually pay a cent more. I think that is the rules of the game. And if you don't play the rules of the game, you will not sell. So just make sure that you on top of it, and you are the best in the market. Not a cent more.
Andrew, maybe if I can come to you. So we've heard pork is nutritious, we've heard it's affordable, we've heard it's versatile, but chicken still dominates the market. What was the stat early on? 34 kilograms a ton, whatever, per year, 34 kilograms per year per person in South Africa. Can pork realistically compete with chicken's price point, or is that battle already lost in a country like South Africa?
Yeah, we have to be realistic as well. And the chicken industry, the chickens has got a short production cycle. It uses the grains that we feed them much more efficiently with the FCR rates. But I don't think we need to compete in that sense. I think pork has got the advantage of being a consistent, good product, and also a very versatile product. As a raw material, if you look at the carcass, it's very versatile. There's many cuts that you can get out of that, and I think Escort is a testament to that in their new product development, with a number of products that they can get out of a pork carcass, and I think that is where the advantage lies.
I think I alluded to the LSM groups and welfare. We also did it at SAPO with that pharmaceutical company. Had a look at particularly the lowest LSM groups, and some of the interesting things were that there are a whole lot of people that will eat pork, but they'll boil it twice because they're concerned of the safety, food safety. Measles obviously is a big thing. So I think as much as we have the mythbusters around fat in your diet, around whether pork is good for you, the health aspects around measles, we could really do a lot for our pork industry by focusing on the consumers who are concerned. Remember that a lot of those consumers, their interaction with pigs is free-roaming pigs. Think the Eastern Cape. We sorted out for classical swine fever in the mid-2000s, and there were over 450,000 pigs in the Eastern Cape. But those pigs are kept in a very informal type, free-roaming environment, and people see them as dirty. So we could do a lot by changing the perception in that, and it would make the products that are being developed for that particular market, which would be more affordable. There was an interesting, we had the Agri-SA Congress on Wednesday, and there was an interesting comment made by the owner of Roots, where he said that When a consumer comes into their shops, they spend 200 Rand. If the product costs X, they might only get 1.5 kilos for their 200 Rand. If the product costs Y, they might get 3 kilos. So price drives it, but if they already don't want the product because they think it's unhealthy and dirty, you're not going to win. So we do have a lot of space, I think, within the South African pork market to grow pork. Here I am, a red meat guy, talking about pork.
Hey, pork is red meat.
Yeah, I'm wearing 2 hats. So I think there's a lot of space. And I think one of the take-home messages for me on this whole subject is you started off right at the beginning saying we eat pork at particular occasions. Making pork an everyday meat. I mean, I think I can speak in a room like this. A lot of people find it very easy to go and grab a fillet or a rump or something and quickly fry that at home or quickly cook it for the evening meal. We need to have that perception that you don't have to buy beef or you don't have to buy a few chicken pieces. You can go and buy a piece of pork and cook it as quickly to make it an everyday affordable protein.
Sean, I want to get your perspective on it, but I also just want to say I think Escort does a brilliant job at making pork from a brand perspective at least look safe, bougie. I want to buy it when I see the Eskom branding and the campaign. Just look at the truck outside. I mean, it speaks to a modern day consumer. Sean?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think, realistically, the situation that we're in at the moment, with the shortage of beef and beef price has increased, I think more and more consumers are realizing the value for money that pork offers. So it's a much more affordable protein, and so we haven't stolen the market, but we've just gained it by just being a very good alternative at a very good price.
If I also may add, we are talking a lot about consumer education, but it was mentioned in the introduction as well, is retailer education. And that is something where I don't even think we need to ask the consumer to pay more for a welfare certification, because my question is, having seen what I've seen on farm, I don't think we need a welfare certification, because on proper farms, the pigs are treated absolutely brilliantly. And if that can be translated to the retailer as a standard, whether it comes from Pork 360 being explained to the retailer a bit better, and that spills over to the consumer, similarly, that pork is clean, and what do specific cuts mean, what do specific processes mean, on the brand perspective, but specifically going through to the retailer, there's a big gap there in terms of how can we translate to the consumer.
So Enrique, you're a scientist, but you also understand a thing or two about communication to consumers. So we can brand, we can market, we can myth bust all day, but perception lags behind reality. Is pork's image problem a consumer issue, or has the industry simply failed to tell their own story properly?
I love that question. And I think...
I'm listening carefully to the answer.
No, because I think at this point in time, where the mistakes of the past have been rectified, it is now a matter of we are not communicating that. The consumers want to have pork. The consumers are having bacon. They are having pork belly, but they're not cooking it medium. You understand? They're not having fillet because maybe they don't know it exists, maybe it's too dry, maybe they just haven't seen it, or because they're concerned of the safety. So we are at a beautiful point where the mistakes of the past are almost far enough in the past where people are willing and able to try pork in many different ways, but they either don't know how, or there's just that little low-hanging 10% doubt that can certainly be addressed with proper communication.
Fully agree with you. I'm tired of reading just pork recipes in glossy magazines. It should also be marketed to ordinary South Africans. There you go.
One comment and then maybe a question to the panel. Farmers can't be expected to obtain premiums for farming responsibly. It's expected by the consumer. So I'm supporting the sentiment of your panelists. Can we talk about protectionism, be it pork, be it chicken, as a way of growing the economy, and once again boosting South African production and the economy. I think in the pork industry we also see a lot of dumping or prices coming in lower than production prices into the country of cuts and portions maybe not utilized in other parts of the world.
Who wants to go? Peter, you were the CEO of SAPA for a long time.
Yeah, Richard, I'm not sure I entirely understand your question, and you absolutely good to reframe it if I don't give you the answer you're wanting. So I think there was a lot of noise around our protectionism from the States, around we trying to keep some viral pig diseases, one in particular, PRRS, out of the country, and it is seen as protectionism, but I'm always at pains to I got employed at SAPA in 2008 to handle PRRS, so it's a bit of my baby. It is pork, any pork can come into South Africa. There's just a risk mitigation pathway if we see it as risky pork. And so it's not a protectionism method for trade. It is really a desire for us to control diseases. The guy sitting here on my left and possibly two to the left there, they get upset with us around importing genetics because we only allow frozen semen into the country. And it's all part of the same process of being South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, a couple of Scandinavian countries boast the fact that they don't have viral diseases that most of the European countries, the States has, a lot of the Asian countries have. So we want to protect our health status because that gives us a production competition edge, a economic edge. So that's what it's about. So pork comes into the ribs because South Africans eat more ribs than we can ever produce. That comes in without any kind of duties. But all other pork products come in with a duty of 15%, which is not a particularly high tariff compared to some other tariffs that get levied. So yeah, we don't really have a protectionism market as far as a pork or protectionist mindset as far as pork's concerned.
Stefan, did you want to add
Did
that?
I answer the question?
No. I see your hand. Skryf jou microfoon.
Hello, my question, maybe it's something that Stefan mentioned on his presentation about retail, and it seems we lost a bit of confidence in retail to help us to get pork going again, and guys are taking matters in their own hand, which I think is good. Two statements on that. One statement is I can agree with that. If you go in any retail supermarket, it's actually disappointing to see the pork section. And that's even in the area where we live, which I consider on the higher LMS group. Even that section is very disappointing. It doesn't really appeal to me to walk in there and to buy my pork, and that's why I buy my pork somewhere else. But even if you compare this to the European supermarkets, it's really different. If you go in Albert Heijn in the Netherlands and you go to the pork section, it's actually really appealing, and that would be even my first choice. Going to the beef, not even looking at price, just looking at how it's been set out. So that's the first comment. And the second comment with this and being part of the pork chain and really making an effort to see this grow and going forward, it's still a reality that our retail sector, if you look at the amount of feed going into the sector, that's still where if we want to grow, this is still where people buy their food and where they buy their meat. Should we not try as an industry, although we're taking matters in our own hands, which in per se I'm in favor of that, and I think it's good, should we, if we really want to see this grow, not make a bigger effort and see how we can change the perception about how we put pork in front of and work together with retail. It still should be the cheapest way. Sean mentioned how the challenges that they have to move pork around, and it's not easy. But then overall, there should still be that if it's about affordable meat and affordable pork, should we not try as an industry make a bigger effort to see how we can push that forward?
Can I make a comment? Yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah, but so one of the and I guess this is more a personal opinion, I certainly am not standing up for the retailers. But I think if we understand that retailers have on their shelves what they think is going to move, because that's all the retailers do. Is I mean they're part of the chain, and they would give space to whatever product they think they're going to sell the most of. They're volume-driven businesses. So if we understand that as an industry, I think one of the things that SAPO has been doing incredibly well within the last few years is trying to get out of the silo mentality, you know, that pork producer organizations just for farmers. We try and engage with our other value chain members, whether it's the abattoirs, whether it's the processing plants, and then the retailers. I guess the distributors, probably you don't need to be talking to them. And then obviously the consumer. And I certainly personally feeling that, you know, you talk about the snowball effect. And I'm beginning to think that, not beginning, I've thought it for a while, that the pork industry and pork consumption is on the cusp of growing quite exponentially in the future. And I think then, you know, the retailers will make more of an effort because people are going to come in demanding pork, and they'll need to make more effort because then they'll be competing with each other as to who has the most attractive, you know, fridge space with a diversity of products. So I really do believe things are changing.
But they can only change if two things happen. If pork is positioned as the protein of choice, and also if the pork industry can maybe, like lamb and beef, work to get a premium image. I mean, people buy lamb because it's the end of the month salty crack, the rest of the month they'll eat beef or chicken. And maybe this curveball question is for you, Sean. Can pork ever compete with beef or lamb on quality and prestige? I mean, the red meat industry has invested quite heavily to position itself in terms of quality and prestige, or should it double down on being the smart, everyday choice?
Sure. Yeah, I think the nice answer would be say, of course we can compete, and we are competing, and I think pork is becoming more and more visual on braais, and people are sort of picking out, you know, rather neck steak over expensive T-bone. So I think it's there, and it's competing in a good space. I think per capita wise, I don't think we're really going to realistically be able to say that we're going to catch up. I mean, I think it's just so engraved into South Africans, you know, to have a braai and would normally be beef. But I think we're in a comfortable space. I mean, if we've come and we've grown 20% over the last 10 years, and we just keep doubling that up and keep going, I mean, then we get into a really nice, comfortable groove and a really nice consumption.
Any other questions from the floor? Great. We've tested the ideas, we've debated the challenges. It's time to look forward. Right on time. Each of our panelists, I will ask you to share just your vision for the South African pork industry in 2030. A short, sharp statement. We'll start with you, Andrew.
Yes, Ava, I thought about it. In 5 years, it's quite a quick time. It's in 5 years' time we'll be
less than 5 years.
Yeah, so,
feet in a bikkie.
Yes. So I wrote it down, and I think, and we spoke a lot about it today, is on the efficiencies. I hope that, and my wish is that producers can unlock the efficiencies and supply a constant, reliable raw material to the processors. And then also with the processors, and then also the retail that we are missing, unfortunately, from this panel, is to engage with the producers, what the producers are doing, and continue to invest in their own businesses to ensure that the quality raw material that's been received from the farmer gets processed and retains that quality. And then also, I envision then that consumers will start trusting the people behind their food, and that we are implementing the correct animal welfare practices and sustainable practices as well. And then also a continuous investment in animal welfare in our businesses, because consumers demand that from us. yeah, we can use that to our advantage to reflect that we are responsible and forward-looking producers.
Stefan?
I think a big thing for me would be not only to have farmers use their data wisely for informed decision making in real time on farm level, but also to use that as kind of a media statement. Look at South African agriculture, look at what I'm doing on my farm, and that's coming a lot to what Enrique is a big advocate of, being proud of what you are doing. And data is the way that we prove that we are the leaders, that we prove that we are doing a good job. So taking that data through all the way to decision making and then to the public image going out, saying, but this is what we do. A bit of technical marketing, using that beyond just the farm gate.
Sean, 2030?
Yeah, I think 2030, I think it would be amazing if farmers can be paid a fair price for the amount of effort that gets put into putting out such a value for money product. And I think it's always overlooked how much effort really goes into raising pigs and what it takes getting a product like that to the consumers. So I think just a fair margin for the effort for the farmers. And I hope by 2030 that more consumers are understanding that pork can really be cooked medium rare, and if you're not as brave, then just medium, you know. And I think they really are missing out on, and they're taking out a lot of the tastiness and the juiciness by overcooking it. Thanks.
I should tell my family that.
Yeah.
Dr. Peter.
Yeah, I think we haven't kind of mentioned it before, and maybe a bit of a cop-out seeing I wear two hats. But I really would hope that meat protein continues to be the choice, and that the plant protein market doesn't start taking over. You know, I think certainly in some other parts of the world, that's a real concern for them. But a bit encouraged by the fact that some of the labeling rules and laws that are happening is making, you know, the use of terms we've used for certain meat product cuts or preparations, like mince, for instance, you know, that stays with the meat protein. So I hope the meat protein market in South Africa continues to grow.
The plant-based market seems to be suffering at the moment in South Africa. The last 2 years there was a big hype, you know, Beyond Burger on the Spur menu, but I mean, if you've had 2 Beyond Spur burgers, you've had it. Then you're back to pork ribs. Enrique?
Yes, well, if the following conditions are met, that pork continues to produce, the pork producers continue to produce a quality and sustainable product, which I know they will be, I trust the industry. If those conditions are met, then I would love to see the human relationship stored and the human nature gap. I would like to see consumers trusting and getting to know their farmers again, and farmers trusting and getting to know their consumers again. And from my personal goal is to have consumers who are empowered with informed decision making.
Stefan?
Either from my side, you know, keep on working to make sure that we position pork as affordable, and the everyday meal on our plates is important. If we can grow by 6% per annum for the next 5 years, which I really think we can do, we will grow by 34% in 5 years. And if we can get that right, just 6% a year, it will be amazing. And I just want to spread the message to our farmers again, is on the processing side. The South African processors are investing a hell of a lot of money to make sure that we can actually produce the best pork that our consumers actually wants to buy. And we will get it right. And the sky is the limit for us. We must just keep on going.
So my takeaway today is that it will take a whole lot of industry effort to grow the pork industry by 6% in 2030. It's all about data to guide decisions and manage volatility. It's about meat science to deliver tenderness, flavor, quality. It's about animal welfare to earn consumer trust across the LSM groups. And it's about communication to tell the story and to bust myths. It's about business development to make growth sustainable. And it's about consumer trust to turn appreciation into daily choice. And when all of these pieces come together, pork can go from being just something for the special occasion to an everyday staple in South African kitchens. It's time to taste the potential of pork. Thank you to Escort to have a selection of their pork tasters available shortly. Familiar favorites, some exciting twists. And I also want to thank the people who made the Spekgesprek possible. I hope that this continues, the conversation continues, not just at NAMPO ALFA and Boereville, but beyond the greater South Africa. This session was proudly presented by Agritistics in partnership with NAMPO ALFA, proudly sponsored by SAPO and Escort, and a big thank you to Albert Loubser from NAMPO ALFA for helping visualize this conversation, and I have no doubt that it will grow year on year. Thank you to all the panelists. You're incredible. Thank you for sharing so candidly. Thank you to the audience, also the live stream audience, for your curiosity, your questions, your energy. And let's continue to have these conversations beyond the four walls of this hall here at NAMPO ALFA. Have a great day.
Klonk hier lekker. Die kelkie wyn die roep so mooi, ek gooi vir ons 'n knerts. Die namakwalant is helder rooi met die son se hand geverf. Iewers tussen die vlaktes het ek true love gevind. Kalahari nooi, prong springbok mooi soos 'n hippel hier die wind.